All right. Hello and welcome, y'all, to the Sudowrite Weekly Welcome session for today, Tuesday, May 6th. I'm Michael. I lead the community here at Sudowrite, and I'm happy you're here with me. Today, so these welcome sessions are brand new. Last week was actually our first session, but the goal of them is to help you onboard to Sudowrite as comprehensively as possible, as fast as possible. So we are going to cover a lot of ground today. I'm going to show you Sudowrite both from a sort of superficial level, like where things are, what things do, but also give you a little bit of direction on how things work and make sure that you leave the call with a sense of how you can get yourself unstuck if you need to in the future. So let's kick it off. I know a bunch of y'all are brand new to Sudowrite in general. If you've ever used a word processor, Google Docs, Microsoft Word, Sudowrite is a little bit like that. The only difference is that it has some sort of tools that are built to help get you unstuck, help you work a little bit faster. So it's meant to be familiar, it's meant to be a thing that anyone can master, and with some foundations, we think that's totally doable. In order to really grok Sudowrite, in order to understand it and know what you need to know, we need to step through things in a certain sequence. The order that we approach things is pretty important. It's totally possible, like you could join any other call. We do free live classes almost every day of the week. We do them quite frequently. And you could join one and you would be thrown fully in the deep end. And that is not the point of this class. This we're going to step through things nice and slow in the order that is maybe the most logical for you to understand things. And so what does that mean? The very first thing we're going to cover is just the basics, what things look like, where they are, what the sort of core tools on Sudowrite are. We're going to talk about how to make Sudowrite yours. We're going to talk about how to make Sudowrite smarter, specifically smarter in regards to your story and how you think your story should develop. We're also going to talk about bringing your work from outside of Sudowrite into Sudowrite and what that looks like. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about series support. If you're an author that likes to write in series, so whether you're writing romance or fantasy or whatever, and you have a sort of book universe that you want to keep together, we'll talk about how Sudowrite can help with that. And with that, I'm going to kick over to Sudowrite. So I hope y'all can still see my screen. I didn't say this up top, but feel free to use either the chat to queue up questions, or you can use the little hand raise emoji if you have questions. Ideally, we'll keep them topical to whatever we're reviewing in the moment. If you have a sort of broad question, you can either bring it up in the Q&A at the very end, or you can drop it in the chat and we'll circle back to it at the end there. So what you're looking at, this is Sudowrite. This is Sudowrite's homepage. Anything that you see that looks like a book is a project. So we call these projects. And the reason we call them projects is because a single Sudowrite project could contain lots of different documents. When you look at a project on Sudowrite, I'm going to scroll down here. The project has a title. It has a number of words in that project. That's a cumulative number of words. It has a little timestamp for when you last touched it. And if you hover over the right corner of a project, you can see the 3-dot menu. That gives you a few different options. You can export a project. What that's going to do is create a .zip file for you that includes all of your documents. They're exported as .docx files, and they're all rolled up into a zip if you want. You can duplicate a project. So if you're not sure about a direction you're taking a project, you can duplicate it and have one version of it where you go in a very experimental direction and just leave the original document right there. You can also use this Move To menu. And the reason you might use the Move To menu is simply organization. You have either folders or series folders as an option on Sudowrite. So if I scroll back up, you can see I have a couple of things here. I have a folder called Works in Progress. I have a folder called Presentations. I have a folder called Public Domain where I keep all my public domain books that I tinker around in. And then you can see this thing that also looks like a folder but has a series icon on it. that is a series folder. So I'll just show you. I will click into the public domain folder here. This is what the inside of a folder looks like. I have documents that are ordered based on recency. That's one thing on Sudowrite. Even though it looks a little desktop-like and you can click and drag, the order is always recency based. You can't really rearrange yet, maybe someday. But from within a folder, you can do things like click and move to if you want to move it to a different folder. You can also click and drag. Maybe I want to move Metamorphosis back to home. I can drop it right over the home. I could create a folder inside of a folder. So if I go up to the new menu, I click folder and I say subfolder, you can see here I'm going to go back to public domain. I'm going to move Metamorphosis into subfolder, and here you go. I have an actual sort of file path that appears up top, home, public domain, subfolder. So I always know where I am, and I can, like I said, use that move to menu to get something back. I want to put it back into public domain. I could click and drag this over public domain, or I could use move to do that. So that is folders. Now, I know I mentioned series folders. We're going to circle back to series at the very end, but just so you know, the only aesthetic difference is really that little icon. So if I click into one of my series folders, it looks very much like another folder. However, I have a timeline, and this is where I can establish a canonical series timeline. So we'll talk more about that when we get to series. For now, let's go back and let's pop into a project. We have every new account created on Sudowrite includes a tutorial project. So you should have a tutorial project on your account if you want to follow along. It's going to look a little bit different than mine because I messed mine up. I'm going to be honest with you. I've tinkered around in here a little bit. We're going to cover the sort of four main sections that you're looking at here. In the left bar, where you just saw me poking around, this is my documents. And I also have folders. So I mentioned each project can have multiple documents. Here you can see there's a full list. By default, this would probably just be a single document. There may be a full list of documents. I can go to new and I can either create another blank document or I can create a folder to organize those documents. I'm actually going to create a folder because, like I said, I messed this up. So I'm going to call this folder junk testing. And I'm going to drag these documents that shouldn't be in here into here. And there we go. I just got rid of them all. I can collapse or expand that folder. So that is my left bar. That is what the new button does, that I can click and drag to organize any part of this. You have this tutorial section in your tutorial project. The tutorial section has a few documents with an overview of different features you might use, including some sample pros that you can experiment with. So feel free to poke around in there. The other things I would point out here, you have an import button. So this import's great if you want to bring in just a single document, just one document. You don't want Sudowrite to do anything with it. You're just like, ooh, I was tinkering on this in Word and I want to bring in this doc. That's how you would do it right there. Yes, Story Bible. That's a great question. So I mentioned we need to go through this in sequence. To appreciate Story Bible, we're going to cover a couple of other things, and then we're going to hit Story Bible. So the center section here, this is probably the most intuitive or familiar. This is your word editor. This is your text editor. Up top, you have rich formatting options. You also have the little find and replace. The thing that probably is the most disorienting or new to you would be these things on the right. You've got a few options here on the right. You have your document history. You have the draft tool, which we'll talk about after talking about Story Bible in a moment. And you have show comments. So to illustrate something here, let me go into chapter 1 here. So I'm in the first chapter of my test chapters here. And if I highlight something, you'll see what appears. This is what we call the selection menu. This appears anytime we highlight. And the selection menu is dynamic, and whatever options come up changes depending on what you highlight. So if you're ever like, I swear I was getting a word replacement option when I used the highlight menu, you probably were. The difference is you had, let's see, a single word selected in order to make that come up. We call these related words. Related words come up when you've selected a single word. Wooden, louvered, cross-braced, headboard. Okay. So those will come up on a single. Now, if you have a fuller passage selected, you're going to get contextually appropriate suggestions in that selection menu. And so if I click comment here, for example, I have the ability to annotate my own document. So I can leave a note for myself to remind myself to come back and revisit something. This commenting feature ties in very closely to the Sudowrite sharing feature. So if you have a work in progress that you've been writing in Sudowrite and you want to share a document, say I want to share a draft of chapter 1 with my beta reader, I can click this share button. It gives me a little friendly video overview. I can share the chapter, and whoever receives that URL is going to get their own fresh, clean copy of the document to mark up. They can leave comments on it. Nobody's going to be able to see their other people's comments except you as the author. You're going to see all of those comments actually appear in the side here alongside your own comments, and those can be toggled on and off using the little comments button. So that's what that is. Draft, like I mentioned, we're going to circle back to in just a moment. So I'm going to turn comments off, and I'm going to use this little icon. So this is something I think I forgot to cover last week, but this little caret, the little arrow, these exist in 3 places. You can see it on the left, you can see it on the right, and you can see it in this top bar. And what this lets me do is collapse and expand my sidebars. So maybe I'm somebody who needs a distraction-free working environment. I can get rid of everything, and I can just work, and I can make this the right size that looks good to me, and I have everything out of the way. So that is a nice little focus mode that you can enable using these little carets to hide whatever you want to hide. So that covers these 2 columns here. I'm going to cover the right. So the right section, this is what we call the right bar, is called the history bar. The history bar is where anything that the AI helps you with, most things the AI helps you with, are going to appear in this right column. And so here, these little cards that you can see on the right, this is a brainstorm card. This appeared after I used the brainstorm feature. So whenever you use an AI function, it'll appear over here. And I'm going to show you the first example of this by scrolling to the bottom of my document. And I am going to put my cursor here, and I'm going to now show you the last section, the toolbar up top. So the toolbar has a few features that we consider the sort of main features of Sudowrite. That's the reason they're pinned here, is because you probably are going to use them fairly frequently. So if I have my cursor in the document and I click the right button, is basically an AI-powered autocomplete. And so what that means is it reads a whole bunch of words prior to where the cursor is, and then in the right bar over here, it writes a continuation. So it reads where I was going, and it makes some educated guesses as to where I might want to take the story from there. And it gives me a pass. Now, if I like this, what I can do is I get this card on the right, and I can scroll down and I can click Insert. And it's going to be inserted with purple text, so I know that it was the AI that wrote that. Once I make edits to it, that text turns black, just so light signal to me and as to what I edited and what Sudowrite contributed. You don't have to click insert. You can copy the card. You can also just say you like how it started, but maybe it went a little off the rails. You can just grab a passage and manually copy paste that into your document if you prefer. So that is the right button. We'll cover an expanded view on that in just a minute. I don't want to get too in the weeds. The rewrite button is similar. So you can grab a passage and click rewrite. Only now, instead of instantly getting a rewrite, you actually get a little control panel that appeared in that section on the right with some options. Rephrase, shorter, more descriptive. You can also do custom. So I could say, rewrite to be in first person for some reason. Say I want to change the POV of this. And what's going to happen when I click go is it takes the passage that I've selected and it rewrites it according to my instructions. And that is it. So I could click again, since I have this highlighted, I could click insert, it's going to replace it. Or I could copy paste it, whatever I want to do. If I do nothing, this card is still going to stay here on the right. So I can always refer back to it. So that is there for my reference. I can expand and collapse cards by clicking on them just to make this right bar tidy. So that is rewrite. Describe is specifically something that helps us add sensory detail. So say there is a section here. Let's see. Old man watching from across the market. The market's not really described here. So let me say the market. And I'm going to click describe. And actually, before I click describe, I'm going to show you what this little down arrow next to describe does. Because if I click describe, I'm going to get a bunch of description. I'm going to get a visual description, auditory description. I'm going to get all sorts of descriptions. And I have the option before I click describe of toggling some of these on or off. Maybe I'm really only interested in what the market looks like. Maybe actually smell would be helpful. And so I can toggle these on and click describe. And what's going to appear in the right bar is my card for describe, where it's giving me visual descriptions and here some smell descriptions. So the air is filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread, spicy herbs, ripe fruits. Mixed in are less pleasant scents of manure from livestock being sold and sweat from hardworking vendors. Okay, so this adds a little color to my description of the market. And where describe is a little bit different from these other features, you're probably never going to insert a whole describe card. Instead, you're going to find what you like and just apply that to your writing. So describe is a good example of a tool where it's just as much for inspiration and direction as it is for the prose that Sudowrite is writing for you. Let's see, I need to make my window a little bit bigger for this to, there we go. Hope that didn't break anyone's display. So that's 3 of these buttons. Now, what you may have realized is this little down arrow, based on how it works in describe, that denotes some degree of settings. So if we go to rewrite and click the down arrow, you can see we have a number of cards option. So maybe just for efficiency's sake, rather than clicking rewrite and getting one rewrite, one rewritten version, maybe I want to get 4 different versions of a passage rephrased every time. So if I grab this last passage and I click rewrite and I go, with rephrase, what it's going to do is it's going to give me 4 different ways to rephrase it. And that's based on that setting there. Now doubling back to right, we have the same thing. We have that little down arrow. This is where things get really powerful, right? Because I can expand and you'll see I have not just auto, but I have guided. And so what guided write is, if I put my cursor here and choose guided write, here I can get suggestions. I can either write, so basically give it a direction to take the autocomplete. So I could write in this field, I think he needs to meet an orphan in the market and do something nice and give the orphan some bread. I could write that in plain text and click write guided, and it's going to write that completion. Actually, let me just show you rather than tell you. Show don't tell, right? Cavendish meets an orphan. Oh, they're not at the market yet, are they? They're talking about the market. Oh no, they're at the market, maybe. Meets an orphan at the market and gives him some free cheese. That's what I'm going to say. So if I just give it that degree of direction, instead of writing the next however many words on its own, it's taking that into account as the AI writes this completion. And it's trying to make logical sense of how your proposed completion fits into that. Okay, so he does, yeah, they're not actively at the market right now. So the guided write did have to send them to the market. They say next morning, he and Mooch fall into their rhythm. And is there an orphan? Yeah, there we go. 3 copper, free sample. There you go. So that worked. Now, that was guided write. So basically, the other thing we can do with guided write, just to show you, I gave the direction here, but if we don't know, we can turn on suggestions, and guided write is going to give me 3, sort of a choose your own adventure, right? I get 3 different options. Okay, he teams up with his cow. I don't like that. I don't like any of these suggestions. So I can click the refresh button and get 3 fresh suggestions. And if there is a path that I wind up liking, okay, I can click that and it's going to write directionally in that way. Now, if I go back to the drop-down menu, you can see tone shift. We're not going to cover tone shift today. It is a sort of a great way, something you can experiment with your own time if you want to see what it looks like to change the flavor of what you're writing. I think more important is showing you the right settings. Because write is just this idea of autocomplete to get you unstuck is a very powerful tool. We give you some knobs and dials that you can tweak. So you have a creativity slider. If you drag this to most, you're going to get the most creativity, the least creativity. That should be pretty intuitive. What I mean by that, the way AI works is this thing has read nearly every book there is. And so if I say it was a dark and stormy and I turn it down to least creative, it's going to say night. And if I turn it to most creative, maybe it would say cocktail that he drank that evening before getting into a fight. And so that is how you can think about the creativity slider. You have the same number of cards that you have under the rewrite button. And what you have that's new is you have this length of cards option. So you can choose how many words you want Sudowrite to target each time you click the right button. 50 would just give you a little bit of a completion. 500 is going to give you several passages to work from. And a couple things here. Key details. Key details is a place that if I turn this on, I can provide some sort of anchor grounding context that I want Sudowrite to consider every time I click that right button. So if, for example, if this took place on Mars, I could write this takes place on Mars. There's no blue sky here. We're on Mars. This is if you are a pantser, if you're someone who writes without an outline, you do discovery writing, key details can be very helpful little control in that context. But there are better ways to provide that sort of story smarts that I was talking about earlier, where you can make Sudowrite smarter and make sure it's achieving your vision. That's Story Bible. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Before we do, I do want to show you have a prose mode selector here. The prose mode, this is where you're choosing essentially the AI brain that's doing the writing for you. So, as a baseline homework for y'all and experimentation, what I would recommend is you go into your write button, you find this prose mode selector, and you toggle it. You can change between a few different prose modes, or if you already know, if you understand AI and you want to poke around under the hood, you can actually toggle this advanced selector down and choose pretty much any AI model that's available. So the newest GPT from OpenAI, for example, is in here, GPT 4.1, if you wanted to see how that wrote. Now, why might you do this? Different AIs, you can think of them as like swapping out the brains, or to put it in a software context, swapping the brushes that you would use in something like Photoshop. You are changing, in this case, the pen. And what that means is they're going to make different decisions and they're going to sound different. Their voice will be different. So some people have different preferences here, and the only way to figure out what you like is through that experimentation. What I will say is while you're getting acclimated, while you're learning about Sudowrite, if you toggle to the basic prose mode, you're not going to get the most mind-blowing prose. It's not going to knock your socks off, but it is incredibly economical, meaning you're going to get the most mileage out of your credits, out of your plan. So if I toggle on basic and I say use basic, you'll see basic appears here. And if I put my cursor here and I click auto, I'm going to go back to auto and click write, it's going to give me a write card in the right column, in the history column, that was powered by basic, that was written by that basic model. And so here Cavendish closes the box. Okay, so it's rating this completion. Now I want to show you, I mentioned credits, so it's only fair to show you how you would even keep track of something like that, the credits that you've used. Because I just clicked a whole bunch of buttons on Sudowrite and I don't even have a context for what that cost in the context of my plan. So if I click this gear in the upper right, I get a menu. This is my settings menu. And I can go to the little text right here that says show recent activity. If I click show recent activity, that's going to show me what each button click cost. So you can see when I was using Muse, that's Sudowrite's own AI model, we've tried hard to make one that just sounds beautiful, sounds like New Yorker quality prose, like high quality, great for narrative fiction, but it is very much designed for narrative fiction, meaning you'd have a harder time maybe writing nonfiction with Muse. You can see here, Muse, using that for, let me compare apples to apples. I used Write Auto and Muse cost 5,400 credits to click that button. When I toggled down to basic, it only cost me 670 credits. If you're someone who really just uses the right button for inspiration, for like directions for this idea to get unstuck, and you're going to rewrite anything in your own voice anyway, basic's great. Use an economical model like that. If you're someone who wants help finding the right words and you lean on the models for getting the prose just right, you might want to experiment with Muse or Excellent, a model that can really land that for you. Okay. The other thing, I want to make sure we're somewhat on agenda here. I mentioned, so Brainstorm, we have some resources on Brainstorm. I'm going to share those resources with you at the end. Poke around in there. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a tool that'll help you brainstorm and get some fresh ideas. You saw a brainstorm card in my history column on the right. Let's see. If I go back to that, it'll give you a sense of what you get out of Brainstorm. Where was that? Way down here. Well, maybe it was in a different document. Oh, here it is. So a neighborhood diner where the protagonist likes hanging out. No, here we go. So I had asked for towns that may exist in a fantasy setting extending the universe of Jack and the Beanstalk, and it gave me a bunch of great suggestions, which I then saved to my history column. So that's Brainstorm. Poke around in there. I don't want to spend too much time on it because we have more important things. I mentioned the next step is making Sudowrite yours, making it your own. So there's some obvious ways to do that in the settings menu where you can change the font, you can change the text size, the spacing, you can even change the theme that you're using. So for someone for whom sorbet is too bright and pink and in your eyes, you can toggle to charcoal and you're going to have that dark mode you've always wanted. I happen to pay, so I'm going to bias back towards this, toggle back, and there we go. So that's one example of making Sudowrite yours. Another is even more powerful. Say, for example, there's where I need help is not in the writing, it's not in the inspiration. Where I need help is the editing. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. And this is a theme that comes up a lot on Sudowrite, where you have 3 to 4, 5 different ways to achieve the same goal. And that's something that we've done intentionally because we recognize everyone's process is different. And so we want to support your workflow no matter how you work. And so I've already showed you rewrite, where I can grab a passage and click rewrite from up here. But you also saw rewrite in the selection menu. That's the same rewrite. It is the same, you're just choosing a different way to work, a different way to pop it open. It might be more convenient doing it from the selection menu. But there's this button on the right here that you see called Quick Edit. If I pop Quick Edit open, Quick Edit is one of our 2 quick tools, and these allow you to work inline. So rather than sending a card over to the right and bringing it in, you can just make edits right here. I think I used that example earlier of changing the POV. I can say, change this to first person from Cavendish's POV. And if I say edit, I get a struck through version. And there above it, I get a rewritten version. I wake up as the first rays break. I rise, my bones protesting. And so it kept everything the same. Really, all it changed was the POV, since that's what I asked. If I like it, I can click accept. The struck through version gets nixed. I can also reject it and just be back to where I was. So for those keeping track, that's the second way to do a rewrite here. There's actually a third in that same option. If I go to quick edit again, and I toggle, instead of quick edit, I go to quick chat. This is the place on Sudowrite right now to chat. So if you're someone who's accustomed to working in ChatGPT, working in Claude, any of these sort of chat first interfaces, definitely check out quick chat. This can be found in the selection menu, but you can also pop it open with a keyboard shortcut. So if I put my cursor here and I do Command K or Control K, if you're on a PC, it's going to pop open the quick chat menu. So there you go. And I can not just ask it to do things for me, I can ask it questions about my project, which is very cool. So what I could say is let me just illustrate this by highlighting this first passage and going back into quick chat and saying, what are 2 alternative ways to open this chapter? For example, I've made the selection. So what quick chat sees is it sees the selection that I've made. It can see my whole document, and it's referring to Story Bible, which we're going to look at in just a second here. And it said, sure, here are two alternative openings for the chapter. And it gave me two, and I don't like either of them. They're too tropey, and I can say that. I don't like these. Give me something unexpected and sudden. And what it's going to do is take my feedback in real time. It can see its own history. It's going to try and adapt. A deafening crash jolted Cavendish from his sleep, scrambled out of bed to find the cow busting down the face. That's a more impactful way to open a chapter for sure, with a loud, sudden, in media res, as they say. So cool. I got what I liked there. I could copy it out if I want to use it in my document. I could actually say expand on option one. And I'm showing you this because for some people who've become accustomed to this chat interface, you'll do most of your work in Quick Chat. I actually have a workflow where specifically when I'm writing the choose your own adventure, I really like Quick Chat just because it's great for like quick ideation. Here you can see I asked it to, hey, I like number one, give me an expansion of that, and that's what it gave me. One of the coolest things about Quick Chat is Quick Chat. So most of these features do use credits. Quick Chat is one of the features that is just included with Sudowrite. So if I show recent activity here, you'll see it doesn't cost me anything to use Quick Chat or Quick Edit by default. If you find that either Quick Chat or Quick Edit is not smart enough, not up to snuff, not effectively following your instructions, you do have the option to toggle on higher quality. Higher quality is just using a smarter AI, and that will use credits. By default, you can get a ton of mileage just off of the basic. We recently upgraded the brains behind even the basic mode, and so you can get a lot of mileage out of that. Which AI is behind QuickChat? Great question. So default is 4.0 mini, and the smarter, higher quality is 4.0, GPT 4.0. So if you were keeping track, that's rewrite button, quick edit, quick chat. And there's a fourth way to rewrite. There's probably more than that, but the fourth one that comes to mind right now is this. When it comes to Sudowrite, making Sudowrite yours, there's no way to make it more your own than building your own features or installing community built features. So we have this very intimidating puzzle button up top called plugins. If you click that, don't look at my menu. My menu's a nightmare. I haven't cleaned this in a while. But you can explore plugins, and if you do, what you're going to find are a whole bunch of community-built features that accomplish really niche or specific writing tasks or workflows. Plugins can do any of three different things. They can either write, analyze, or transform. And so what I mean by that is, hey, this can do a completion for you, similar to the write button, but maybe tailored to how you want. It can read a whole bunch of stuff and give you feedback on that. Or it can take something that exists there and change it. Or you can do any combination of those things because these things can work in sequence as well. So we won't get too in the weeds. We do classes every week on plugins. Those are on Mondays usually. So if you're ever curious, join us for one of our plugins classes and you will learn how to build your own Sudowrite features. Don't let it intimidate you. Do poke around in here. Go ahead and click add on any of these and they're going to get installed to here. I will just show you Brutal Honesty Bot here. I'm going to click add on Brutal Honesty Bot. I'm going to go back to Sudowrite where I was in my project and my selection here. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to find Brutal Honesty Bot in my plugins dropdown since I've installed it. Good luck me, I've installed too many. Brutal Honesty Bot is here. I click Brutal Honesty Bot and it runs the plugin just like it would run any other feature on Sudowrite. Plugins can be built with simple plain text, or you could build really powerful stuff too. It's a lot of fun. This passage shows potential, but it's mired in cliches and lacks depth needed. Okay, now it's just being mean, but that's what we signed up for. Okay, so that's our top bar. That's our editor. That's our left, middle, and right columns. We're going to circle back to Story Bible. So Story Bible, this part is the killer app of Sudowrite. This is a way to make Sudowrite smarter in regards to your story. It is also a way to take an inkling, a seed of an idea, and turn it into a full-fledged novel. So You have a couple of different approaches for this. So Story Bible does basically three things. It is a way to do that, to take the generative approach where you start from the seed of an idea and take it to a full-fledged novel. But it is also a place to keep the AI on track and a place for you, well, balloons, to have a sort of canonical truth. So it's for the author's reference just as well as the AI's reference. So if you've ever kept, say, a Notion or a Google Doc with all your world building details, just everything you know about your characters, anything like that, that is what Story Bible is. And we have it broken out into these sections. So we're going to look through an example of a completed Story Bible here. I came to this project with a very light shape of an idea where it's set post the events of Jack and the Beanstalk, and this guy who traded away, who scammed the cow from Jack in exchange for some beans, finds out he realized the beans were magic, and he's super bummed. He blew his shot. Like he could have been Jack, but he traded it away. And so it's focused on that character, Cavendish, and I just wrote everything I knew in the brain dump. And I gave Sudowrite that to work from. I filled in the genre. I knew it was going to be a sort of fairy tale retelling, action adventure, heist a little bit. I like that. I like heists. Style, again, you can manually fill this in, but you also have some options. So if I delete that, I'll show you, oops, you have some options. If I click featured styles, you'll get optimized styles from this selector. And the reason we did this is because you only have 40 words in the style section, and this just makes sure that those words are well used. So for this, because I was going in that fairy tale action, I chose action packed, and you'll see the words that it inserted into style. You can experiment with this. You don't have to use this canned style. You can write your own. You'll see limited POV, no cliches, etc., etc. I could click match my style and paste in up to 2,000 words of my own story. And what Sudowrite's going to do is read all of that, create a detailed style analysis, and then it will give me a little compressed version of that style analysis that will fit into that 40 word limit. There are other ways to reinforce style, but we'll revisit that later. Anyways, these are the first three boxes. We call these boxes, the first three boxes in Story Bible. And if you complete these, what they allow you to do is then generate a synopsis. So it's working from your sort of messy brain dump of, I think I want this to happen and this should happen. And Sudowrite's adding structure, helping you shape that up. From there, you can and you should edit this. So this is my recommendation. Think of the AI as a writing partner, as a junior writer, where it's going to say, okay, I've looked at everything you've given me, and how's this? And for the best results, you're never going to take what it gives you on the first try. You're going to say, nice try. You're going to say, let me give you some notes. And so you have a couple of ways to do that. You can go in and you can do line edits here. You could say, no, this whole third act is wrong. I'm going to get rid of it and I'm going to replace it with what I think it should be. Alternatively, you can give those notes in the rewrite section here. Click rewrite. It's going to apply those edits for you. You can do that as many times as you like. I do recommend you dial these things in before you move on to the next step if you're approaching Story Bible sequentially. With this in place, with a synopsis in place, you can move on to a very exciting step where you can generate your full cast. So you can only do this when you have no characters. Right now, my only option is to add a single character. I could say, generate a love interest for Mooch. Mooch is the cow. And because I did that, it's going to have to read everything. It's going to look at the synopsis. It's going to look at the other characters. It's going to say, I guess I'm creating a love interest for a cow, and the AI will resign itself to its fate. But the first time you're doing it, you can import. So Magnus here. Okay. Yeah, look at that. Proud and stubborn former rodeo bull. All right. Oh, I did it. So I can hide that character, use a little caret to collapse it. If you import, or I'm sorry, if you create your whole cast at once, you're going to get this long list of characters with detailed character cards here. They include a whole bunch of default traits, including a personality, a background, a physical description, and a dialogue style. All of these will be filled in for you, but again, if anything doesn't ring true to you, You go in, you edit it. You can also, if you want Sudowrite's help rewriting any of these, you can use the little three dots and choose rewrite. That button also appears if your cursor is inside of a field, you can choose rewrite. And you can say, make his background darker and click go, and it's going to rewrite his background. So that sort of that capability to lean on the AI just where you need help, just as much as you want, exists throughout Sudowrite. Pretty much every field, every step of the process. You could approach Story Bible where you use zero AI. You wouldn't even have to fill in the brain dump because the brain dump is really only used to generate the synopsis, to have something to shape up. You could come in, you could write your own synopsis. You could create character cards manually. And if you do, you would just fill in the name, fill in all of these fields. I didn't mention this, but you can create custom traits either for a specific character or at the default level. I set this up a while ago where my default includes an Enneagram type. All of my characters created will have an Enneagram type generated and assigned to them. So you have a lot of flexibility, and how you use this is totally up to you. World building works similarly, but instead of being for characters, it's for world building elements. And so this might be settings, it might be key events that are important, or lore, magic items in the context of fantasy or even RPG. So you can see here, I created fairy magic just as a sort of lore context for this world. I have this sort of key setting that I've established. But again, I can click generate and I can choose. I could say, yeah, I need a new setting. The farm town where they first found the beans or something like that. And if I click go, it's going to spin up. You can see a little progress bar. It's generating an element. The penultimate step here is generating an outline. So with all these pieces in place, I can click generate and it's going to give me a comprehensive outline. It's going to look at my synopsis, all my characters, all my world building, and it's going to spin up an outline that maps to my preferred outline style. So let's see. I guess I can only select this before I've generated an outline, but I can choose what outline type. So you could do a totally custom outline, or you can use novel outline, which is a default arc. You can choose a romance outline. I think we have Hollywood beats in there. Just save the cat, or I might be thinking of canvas. In any case, we have a bunch of outline types to select from, but you're not married to those. You can generate your own. With all of these parts in place, this is where things get great. The thing that I promised I would revisit, which is going back into a document and clicking open that draft tool. With an outline in place, I now have what should happen in chapter 4. And so I can open the draft tool. You can see what should happen in chapter 4 as pulled from my Story Bible outline, shows up top. And then I can generate scenes. So let me get rid of this actually. I can click generate scenes. And what's happening is Sudowrite is reading this chapter summary from the outline. It's looking at the rest of my Story Bible, including all the details on world building and characters. And it's trying to write the scenes that should happen in order to make sense in the context of the story. I'm going to take a beat here and look at the question here. For the character traits, the current setup shows the different sections for character traits as prose versus eye color, hair color, height, age, etc., all called out on their own. Or does it not make it? It's a great question. This is challenging. So a little bit, it's a matter of preference. So the question is, hey, when you're setting up character cards, can I just put everything into the character description? Is the AI going to understand that? And the answer is, think of the AI like a junior writer. And the gist is, would a junior writer being given the same task be able to understand this? And so what that means is it really is a matter of preference. The reason to break something out into its own box might be like, hey, would I ever want to modify this on its own, independently of everything else? So if a physical description, it feels insufficient and you want to break that out into like really detailed line items, have traits be really specific to like shoe size and waist, inseam, etc. You can create traits like that. The AI is still going to see it all. The AI has to read everything eventually. And so whether it's bundled up into a paragraph or broken out, mostly doesn't matter as long as things are well articulated and labeled. Again, as long as a human could understand it, the AI should be able to. The AI just has a bigger, more capable brain and memory and is able to execute across a lot of tasks. So we generated our scenes from this linked chapter summary. And you can see here, some of these things are underlined. Cavendish, Barbara, Dr. Blythe. Anything that is detected from the story Bible, anything that shows up in the story Bible and characters or world building specifically will be underlined here. And the reason it's underlined is for your reference. It's saying, hey, Sudowrite, no, don't worry, Sudowrite knows. We see that this scene is supposed to include these characters. We see it's supposed to include the cow. We see that fairy magic is referenced in this scene. We're going to make sure the AI sees all of these things when you click that generate button. Here you can see it gave me 5 scenes for what should happen in chapter 4. As with every step of this process, again, delete what doesn't look right, exclude what you want to exclude, pare it down, rewrite, etc. And the last step here, again, just like with the right button, you can choose an AI model that you want to use and you would click generate. What happens here, this is specific to generating prose. When you click generate, it's actually doing like a pre-flight check, right? It's looking at the scenes and it's looking at what's supposed to happen next. And it gives me this. It tells me how many words it's probably going to write based on the scenes that I've written there. It tells me how many credits it's probably going to use. And if there was something wrong, if I only had a single line scene, because again, I can write these manually. If I had one sentence, it's probably going to tell me, hey, scene 2 is way too short. You want to expand it? And I could quick fix it. There's a quick fix button that will appear contextually. I could quick fix it and I'd be in business. And the last step would just be generating prose. And now what it's doing is it's writing chapter prose based off of this, based off of what I have in the scenes field and based off of what exists in my story Bible that it's looking at while writing. So it's going to write. It thinks for a minute before it starts writing, but now it's going to write. I'm going to look back at the chat for a minute. Tomas, thank you so much for fielding some of these questions. Okay, so you can see the prose is streaming in there. Now, while this is happening, I want to show you one other thing because we were working with the right button earlier and something was happening here. We were in chapter 1, we clicked the right button a bunch. I'm going to close my draft tool to show you this and open my right history bar. We clicked right, and when we did, we got this contextual thing that said looked at Cavendish, looked at Felix, Mooch, Titan's Landing, etc. We call these chiclets, but it's just visual context. So it's telling you, hey, when Sudowrite went off to write this, here's what it looked at from your story Bible. So you get this context in pretty much any place where you have a card. So you can see that draft, using draft, it streamed all that prose into my document here. I clicked away, so I cut it short. I would have to stay there if I want it to actually write the whole thing. But it didn't just stream it here, it also created this draft card on the right. And so there you go. I have a backup of it. And we don't have chiclets in draft just yet. Those are reserved for some of these other features like the right button for now. I thought I'd resolve. Let's get rid of my own positive feedback for myself. Okay, so we've made some pretty good progress. There's a couple of things I'm going to speak to briefly, but then I want to arm you with the resources for you to learn about these things and what those are. So we covered the basics. We covered how to basically the varying paths that you can take on Sudowrite to achieve the same goal, including building your own tools to really make Sudowrite your own or installing community built tools. We covered the ability to generate a novel from scratch from this inkling, the seed of an idea, or using Story Bible alternatively, where you're just priming it with all of these story smarts. The last bit, what if I already have a story world? I've written 2 books and I want to write the 3rd book. If you already have work, that you want to continue on Sudowrite, from the home page, you can click this import button. And this import button is different than that import button inside of a project because this one opens something called import your novel. Import your novel will take a finished novel or a work in progress or a messy pile of notes, and it will read all of it and fill in a story Bible for you. So, just to illustrate, that's the reason some of these public domain works are in here, is from testing this. I was able to take a public domain Sherlock Holmes book, run it through that import, and what happens is all of these characters were created for me. So a synopsis was created for me. Sudowrite read the whole thing, wrote a whole synopsis for me. It created an outline of the book, and all of the characters and world building were created as well. So if you're trying to finish a work, import does not use credits. You can use this import button right on the home page to import your work. It's not going to use credits. It's going to fill out a story Bible for you. It might take 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on how much you're having it read. It can read up to 130,000 words, and that will set you up with a starter project. We don't do chapter splitting yet. And so what I mean by that is your imported novel is still going to live in a single document for now, but we're looking at that as a future feature request. The last part that I will just to put a cherry on top, because we talked around series, but we didn't really talk about what it means to have a series on Sudowrite. And now that you understand Story Bible, you can actually appreciate this, because the key difference between a regular folder and a series folder is that a series folder will make certain parts of that Story Bible accessible across projects. So if you're writing in series, it is a safe bet that the protagonist of your first book, Sherlock Holmes, will, if not headline your second book, will probably appear in your second book. And so the Story Bible, when a project is inside of a series folder, appears split. You have essentially the story specific section on the left, and you have the series specific section. So you have the characters down here. Sherlock, there he is. And you also have world building, and all of this is available to any future book that appears in this folder. And so what this means, if I create a fresh, brand new project inside of the Sherlock Holmes series that I've established, I'm starting from scratch when it comes to the prose, but I'm not starting from scratch, because if I go down here, all of those characters that exist in the context of the series exist here. World building, same. Outlines, I can even go down to outline, and if I'm curious where I left off, I can toggle back to outlines from other projects in that series folder. So that's an overview. There's a lot to cover when it comes to series. They're really powerful when well used. And if you ever want to figure out how to use something, and you're not in this class with me where you can ask a question and the next class on the topic isn't for a little while, use this question mark in the upper right. This is all of your resources. So you have those live classes, that calendar of live classes that are coming up. You have the Discord where we've got almost 15,000 authors that are using Sudowrite. You can float questions. We have a very active ambassador community. These are super users with the big brains, including Tomas and a couple on this call. We have our user guide. So this is actually, if you pop into user guide, I can't recommend this enough. This is our documentation. Boy, we've spent a lot of time making sure this is rich so that you should be able to ask questions and get answers. So, for example, I could poke around in here and look for features I'm curious about and how they work. If I go to describe, you'll see there's even a video embedded regarding the describe function. However, we want to make it easy, so there's an AI bot in here, and you can say, how many words can rewrite? Rewrite. And that should read all of our documentation for me and give me an answer. Let me ask again. I was just working with our support team on this issue. Is there a word limit for rewrite? Let me try that. AI is not perfect. That's why I can't. Wow, I might have broken this when I was fixing it earlier, so sorry in advance. Usually it's very impressive that you can just ask the documentation a question and get an answer back. Let me just try. What are credits, for example? If I click that button, okay, there we go. It's able to answer some questions. It's just not cooperating with me right now. So that's docs.sudowrite.com, again, in the question mark menu up top. And then finally, we have our YouTube. And yeah, you can always email us at hi@sudowrite.com. I have a couple of extra minutes. I might be late for another meeting, but that's okay because you're more important. You're here now. Let me go see if there are any questions, and I will make sure that we get through those questions. Let's see. Tomas, if you want to unmute and make sure, or let me know if there's anything that I did not speak to, I'm happy to speak to that stuff. Out. Chapters. Okay. So what about the chapters you wrote? The left top of the story only shows the outline of the chapters. What about the full chapter? Okay, yes. So that is a really good distinction and something that merits one additional minute, which is I'm going to hop back into the tutorial project. And I do think it's important. The story Bible is all of the vitals of our story, including the outline. What it does not include is the actual chapter prose, right? The words for the chapters. That most people write. So you have options, just like anything else. You can write your whole manuscript in a single document if you want to do that. Sudowrite is set up with this assumption that you would write your chapters in separate documents. So chapter 1 here, if I hover over the 3 dots next to the title of chapter 1, you'll see I get this panel. This document linking menu opens and it says linked to chapter 1, the halter bearer in your outline. And so what that means is when I open the draft tool, that's why chapter 1, the halter bearer, shows up here. Because that's how I'm telling Sudowrite, hey, this document I'm writing in, this is going to be my chapter 1. So look at that part of the story Bible. And the cool thing is, if I'm writing chapter 1 here, and I'm using a little AI, and I'm mostly writing it myself, and it goes in a direction that was not correct in my story Bible's outline, I can always go to this section of the outline, click the 3 dots, and click update. And what update is going to do is it's going to read that chapter prose and rewrite this chapter summary according to what actually happened. And that can be really helpful in keeping things in sync and accurate and keeping the AI on point. The other final note I have, and this is a brand new feature as of last week, we added chapter continuity. And so what that means is when I open this menu in chapter 2, I have it linked to that section of my outline, but I also can choose a document it is continuing from. So I can tell it, hey, chapter 1 came first. And this is true all the way through. I could go to chapter 4. I can click this and I can say chapter 4 shouldn't be chapter 2. I want it to continue from chapter 3. And so I can toggle these. And what that does is when I click the right button or when I use draft or even generate scenes, Sudowrite is reading everything that happened first. And so it gives it greater context and a better picture of the arc of things so that it can make better decisions. And for example, it's not going to have a character that died in the last chapter make a appearance in this chapter. And it's less likely to repeat events. It's more likely to accurately represent the desired arc of your story. So that is chapter continuity. That is linking documents to your outline, and that is the last step here of the Story Bible process. I'm going to circle back to questions. I see Jim. How does the import button within a project differ from the one on the project selection screen you described? Great question. This import will always have AI involved, meaning if I import something here, even if it's a single page, the AI is going to read it and pore over it and think and create a story Bible for me. If I'm inside of a document and I click the import button here, this is just going to take that document and it's going to appear in that left menu. It's not going to do anything with it. So it's a way to get the words on the page. You could copy paste too if that's all you're going to do. Okay. Does Sudowrite naturally consider previous projects in a series? That's a really good question. So it will not read by default. It would be very expensive to feed it several books to generate a small completion. What it does consider is where a project is in a series. Meaning, if I was in my Sherlock Holmes project, as long as I had a series timeline established, if I was generating something in project 2, I should rename that something, but if I was generating a project there, what Sudowrite's going to see is, hey, This is the third book in a series. The first two books were X and Y. And so it gets that context. It doesn't have the full historical context. And some folks address that by creating previously on, either in a document in their project or using a world building card. That's another little workaround that some folks have used. You could create a previously on document or a series summary document as the sort of prologue so that your chapter one uses chapter continuity to read the previously on even before you get started in chapter one. That's another thing that you could do. There may even be plugins to facilitate the creation of that. Yeah, and how to export for publish. As of right now, the best way to do that is using these three dots, exporting a .zip. It is not tidily formatted right now. It's going to give you a pile of documents according to whatever documents you've had in that project. But you should be able to import it into whatever your preferred like layout and formatting software is, and that'll get you going. Yeah, so perhaps export synopses or outlines and drop in using series projects for each episode. Yeah, there are definitely folks that go off book. I know there are some folks who use entire projects primarily for like world building and historical context, and they're using it in ways that we can't even foresee or anticipate. Yeah, if you want to drop that in our Discord, someone in the community may have a best, if you can outline what it is you're trying to do, someone in there might have some tips for you. We have a great help channel. Our support team's in there, of course, but also the ambassadors that I mentioned and other community resources. All right, folks, that about does it for us this week. I think we covered some pretty good ground. I know it's a lot to absorb, so please make good use of those resources I mentioned, docs.sudowrite.com, our Discord, and more free live classes. We have more coming up this week. So feel free to drop follow-up questions in the Discord or email hi@sudowrite.com, and I will see y'all next time. Thanks for joining.